Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our the American Bar Association Civil Rights and Social Justice Section Election Law Jeopardy. We're really excited that you're joining this program. A little mea culpa first. This is the first time we've ever run it. So the panelists are all new to the program. This is the first time I'm moderating it. So please bear with us if we have any technical difficulties, but our hope is that you'll learn a little bit about voting rights and redistricting and some of the challenges and issues that might come up in the November 2022 midterm election cycle. So our hope is to just sort of let you engage and let the panelists engage in a little different way than just sort of having talking head presentations. So I will briefly introduce myself. My name is Elizabeth Yang. I am a member of the section on civil rights and social justice. I am also part of their task force on voting and elections, but I am also a member of the section of state and local government law. I'm a member of their council and I chair their elections and voting rights committee. And I am also a member of the ABA's Standing Committee on Election Law and a former director of that entity. And I'd like now to introduce our panelists. I will start with Federico Rodriguez. Federico is the principal of Rodriguez Legal Group, LLC. He was born and raised in Mexico City, and he moved to Chicago with his family as a teenager. And while working full-time during the day as a Spanish language interpreter for the Circuit Court of Cook County, he attended college full-time at nights and weekends, and he received his BA from DePaul University, and he also attended the University of Illinois College of Law, where he received his JD. Federico has served on the Illinois Supreme Court's Character and Fitness Committee since 2015, and he holds or has held leadership positions in numerous bar associations, including the American Bar Association, the Chicago Bar Association, the Illinois State Bar Association, the Hispanic National Bar Association, the Puerto Rican Bar Association of Illinois, and the Hispanic Lawyers Association of Illinois. And please join me in welcoming Federico. We're really excited to have his viewpoint on this program. So welcome, Federico.
Thank you. Hi, everyone.
And then I'd next like to introduce Selena Thomas, who is a diversity director at the American Bar Association. Selena also serves as the director of the Coalition on Racial and Ethnic Justice, the Council for Diversity in the Educational Pipeline, and Legal Opportunity Scholarship Selection Committee. She began her legal career with the City of Chicago Law Department in 2000 before becoming assistant counsel for the Illinois State Bar Association in 2001. She joined the ABA as assistant client protection counsel in 2008, then served as senior counsel in the Center for Professional Responsibility from 2012. She joined the Center for Diversity and Inclusion in November 2018, and Selena attended Carleton College in Northfield, Minnesota, and DePaul University College of Law in Chicago, Illinois. Welcome, Selena. We're really excited to have you with us today. Thank you. And I'd also like to introduce Rushika Sharma. She's a program associate with the section on civil rights and social justice. She graduated from the George Washington University Elliott School of International Affairs in 2019 and received a Bachelor of Arts in International Affairs with concentrations in conflict resolution, security policy, and a regional focus in Europe and Eurasia. Prior to joining the section on civil rights and social justice, she also interned with the ABA Governmental Affairs Office and the Embassy of Canada in Washington, D.C., and Rushika has told me it's okay to share with you that she's a newly naturalized citizen of the United States. So we're really excited to hear her viewpoints from that perspective. So welcome, Rushika. And finally, last and certainly not least, I'd like to introduce Jason Abel. He is a partner at Steptoe and Johnson in Washington, D.C., and he leads Steptoe's campaign finance and political law practice. And he also advises clients on a range of government affairs issues. He also served as chief counsel for U.S. Senate Committee on Rules and Administration Chairman Charles Schumer, and prior to that, he was as counsel for Senator Schumer in his personal office. And Jason is recognized by Chambers USA in the political law arena, and he's been named a top lawyer for campaign and election law by Washingtonian Magazine. He serves on the firm's pro bono committee and is a co-chair of the Civil Rights and Equal Opportunity Committee of the ABA's section on civil rights and social justice. And he has extensive experience in voter protection and voting rights. He is also a lecturer in law at the University of Pennsylvania Carey Law School, where he teaches election law, and a professor lecturer in law at George Washington University Law School, where he teaches campaign finance law and congressional procedure. So Jason, thank you also for joining us. Really excited to have your participation.
I feel like Jason is going to be the ringer. I'm just saying that.
No. This was just used to raise expectations so I could just upset and just, come way down below everyone else.
So, well, I also would actually just like to take a moment to thank the Dean Patricia Salkin at Touro Law School in New York, with whom I had the opportunity to participate in an ethics Jeopardy earlier this year at mid-year, and then decided to create one for election law. So I would like to thank her for her inspiration. And now I think we'll just dive into the program right away. So if you give me a minute, I will share my screen and we'll get going. All right, everyone. Well, welcome to Perfecting Democracy Jeopardy. So are we all ready to go?
Sure.
All right, let's go.
Give it a shot.
See what happens. So our topics today will be alphabet soup, drawing lines, voting is easy, isn't it? Protecting the right to vote, everyone's voice matters, and finally, lawyers as change makers. And we've introduced you to our panelists, but just in case, again, we have Federico, Selena, Rushika, and Jason. So, all right, let's get started. No going back now. All right. Let's start with Rushika.
Oof, I'll take alphabet soup for 100, please.
Okay, and again, I'm gonna open up the question, and then for Jason, Federico, Selena, and Rushika, raise your hand in using the chat thing. All right, ready?
Sounds good.
Here we go. What is the CRA? Jason.
The Congressional Review Act.
Unfortunately, sorry, I can't. It's the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So we will. All right, Rushika.
Ooh, let's keep going with the category. Alphabet soup for 200, please.
All right, ready? What is the VRA? Selena.
Since we're going that way, Voting Rights Act of 1965, I presume.
Exactly. All right, I'm really sorry, my screen, okay.
It takes a moment for your mind to click.
Right. So, yeah, so obviously the Voting Rights Act and I'm sorry, I should have said something about the Civil Rights Act, but the Voting Rights Act is very important because it really is the foundation of everything we'll be talking about today. So let's move on. So Selena, you're up next. Oh, you lower your hand.
Let's go with everyone's voice matters for 100.
Okay. Can you lower your hand first though? So then when we.
Oh yeah, I can.
Okay. Yeah,
sorry.
Okay, perfect. All right, no problem. All right, let's go. So everyone's voice matters for 100. Can you vote if the polls have closed? Jason.
Yes, if you are still in line, closing time, you can still vote even after the polls have closed.
That is correct. so just to be clear, as we let people know that that is the line, right? I mean, you have to be in line, but you can't show up 5 minutes after the polls have closed and expect to vote. So
How about this? What about if the line is outside of the building, for example?
you should still, my understanding, you should still be allowed to vote as long as you have entered the line. So it's just
Right.
really important for people, if they're cutting it close, to make sure that they get there before that time. Otherwise, I think it's going to be hard to make the argument that you should. But that's a very good point, that unfortunately we do have long lines, and sometimes they do extend, beyond the perimeter of the building. But that's very important. Okay, Jason.
All right, let's do protecting the right to vote for 100.
What is vote, Selena?
What isn't? I would say, I don't know if this is a formal definition.
Oops, sorry, go ahead. I clicked, I'm having problems. Go ahead. Just don't look and
Okay.
answer the question. Yeah.
I'm going to look away from it. It's any number of actions that are meant to either limit or prohibit access to the polls. There are any sorts of ways, they've gotten more and more creative as time has gone on, and sort of shockingly so. But a lot of times it's requiring stringent registration requirements, or putting polling places in inaccessible places, putting limits on a jurisdiction's ability, or a person's ability to early vote, or to vote, through the mail, or any other number of things that basically the point is to make it more difficult for a person to exercise their fundamental right to vote. And now I can look at the screen.
Yes, and you were correct. So I'm sorry about that. My screen sharing, my notice that says I'm screen sharing, unfortunately, is right on a button, right above a button that I need to push. So I'm having some, but that's right. So, as you mentioned, voter registration requirements, and then even stringent voter ID laws, right? And what our concern about, and what we as the section want to focus on is also the effect in BIPOC or traditionally underserved and disadvantaged communities. So, all right. All right, Selena.
Oh, let's mix it up. Let's say voting is easy, isn't it, for 300?
Ooh. What is felon disenfranchisement? Jason, I saw your hand up first, but I'm going to give Federico a chance to answer this, if that's okay.
Well, that's not fair.
No, it is. It is. It is.
Well, okay, you're the boss.
Yes. Well, for now.
This is when if you are a felon, you have a conviction, you're not allowed to vote.
Correct. Yeah, and actually what I'd love to do right now is we see, and I think maybe Federico, you might have thoughts, Rushika or Jason or Selena. I'd like to maybe have a little discussion about where we see this going. I mean, I think we know historically there have been, it did start, I think in many states, that once a person was disenfranchised, it was very hard. And now we have sort of different ways where, in some states, you don't, once you have been released, you don't have to do anything and you can vote. So I'm just wondering if maybe we could talk a little bit about, what you see coming up the pike, and what the trend is.
Well, that is a trend. The trend is to reinstate the rights of felons to, well, once they, they have paid the debt to society to have the ability to vote afterward. I think it seems to be heading that way. I do see that in a lot of states, particularly more progressive states, certainly. So in general, I think that is where the country's headed.
Yeah.
Until the Supreme Court says otherwise.
Nah, don't get me started. I mean, just yes. But the other thing I would point out is you'll notice a trend of disenfranchisement efforts associated with the same communities over and over again. And so because the prison population is overwhelmingly people of color for any number of reasons, right? Or people from poor communities, there's a direct correlation between limiting access for those people through felony disenfranchisement, just as there is through voter disenfranchisement. The same groups of people are being suppressed, and that is the trend, and that is the point of both of them.
I would also just want to tack on to Federico's point that it is really staggered. I mean, you have jurisdictions like Florida where it is, under the condition of the crime that you were convicted of, versus a jurisdiction like DC where incarcerated people actually do have the ability to vote and can vote from prison. So it does very much, there is a lot of variation there of what full enfranchisement looks like versus kind of how other states or other jurisdictions have looked at it.
But there's no blanket system, right?
No.
Right. It varies. All right. So Federico, you want to pick again? Oh, can you lower your hand?
Oh, sorry about that.
It's okay.
Goodbye, hand. Let's see. Let's do protecting the right to vote for 200.
Okay. What are voter roll purges and why are they necessary? Jason.
It's when an election official will go through voting lists and take off voters. And they would claim it's important to make certain that the lists are accurate, to quote unquote, get rid of dead people from voting. These have a serious voter suppression impact on a variety of different communities, the Black community and other communities of color. And, there are a lot of folks, myself included, that say that these types of voter roll purges are being abused in the name of, voter integrity and in essence turn to voter suppression.
Yes. So purging voter rolls is the practice of removing individuals from voter registration lists. The practice is necessary to maintain accurate lists, but as Jason mentioned, they can also be used to cull legitimate voters from registration lists, and statistics have shown that states and jurisdictions with histories of discrimination often have the largest purges of voters. So this is, again, it's the fine line, I think, in election administration where we do need to have some process. And what we find is that, in the name of integrity, that there is really overzealous and unnecessary purges of voters. I'm just sort of wondering if anyone has any other comments or experiences that they'd like to share on this issue.
I mean, you have all these you have anecdotal stories of individuals who have been voting all their lives, particularly the elderly who have never had an ID, for example, and suddenly they can't. They've been purged. They can't prove when they registered originally. They can't show an ID and demonstrate that they had the ability to do that. So we've seen a lot of that going. Well, these anecdotally, and these people in particular also not only just based on color, but also the elderly in particular have this issue.
Okay, great. So
give him his points.
Oh, shoot.
Thanks, Federico. I appreciate it.
Sorry. Can I go back? I don't think I can go back. All right, Jason, I'll add 200 points. I'm so sorry. See, I'm a bad moderator. So
don't worry about it. No.
We'll keep you honest. We'll keep you honest.
Yeah, we'll keep going. Let's do protecting the right to vote for 300.
Okay. I knew running this board was going to get me confused, and what is pre-clearance? Jason.
Pre-clearance is a process under the Voting Rights Act, and it used to be a process under the Voting Rights Act, pre-Shelby County, where certain jurisdictions, when they were to change certain aspects of voting, we'll keep it general, not too in the weeds, they would require pre-clearance from the Justice Department or a judge. Shelby County essentially struck down the coverage formula that determined which jurisdictions required pre-clearance in Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act, and this now is rendered Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act pretty inefficient, to say the least.
I'm sorry, I'm just really, okay, there we go. And so everything that Jason just said is right there. And I'm going to give you your points right now before I forget. So sorry about that. And then just in addition to that, the covered states prior to Shelby were Alabama, Alaska, Arizona, California, Florida, Georgia, Louisiana, Michigan, Mississippi, New Hampshire, New York, North Dakota, South Carolina, South Dakota, Texas, and Virginia. So
I would just add to that, that even though pre-clearance applied to those states particularly, I think it sort of kept the non-covered states in check, because they knew that there was sort of a line that they could not go beyond based on what was allowed in the pre-clearance states. So I would argue that the essential gutting of Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act has sort of created a free-for-all in most states in limiting access to the polls, regardless of whether or not you were covered under pre-clearance or not.
no, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I think what we've seen is, right, more different kinds of voter ID laws, and even redistricting has been heavily affected by everything that happened after Shelby. It did sort of rewrite. I mean, instead of by just invalidating the formula, it just took the teeth out of everything. They chose to leave an enforcement mechanism in there that is unenforceable, right? So they could say that they didn't touch that part. It was just by eliminating the enforcement mechanism. There's just no way. There's no practical way for it to happen. So, all right.
Jason gets his point to remember before you go on.
I got it. So he really has 600. So that's
He actually has 700, doesn't it? Yeah, I think so.
Wasn't it 200?
I told you he was a ringer.
All right, Jason.
Let's mix it up. Let's go lawyers as change makers for 100.
Okay. So I want to help ensure voting rights for all, but I don't have any election law experience. Does that matter? Rushika.
I'm going to go ahead and say, no, it does not matter. You have the ability in a lot of jurisdictions to be a poll worker, and that just requires a couple hours of training, but you have the ability to help.
There are also, because, I don't know how to be quiet. There are also local organizations that you can volunteer with that will train you to help triage calls for people who have questions, who are having problems accessing the poll or facing challenges. So and you don't have to have special experience special election law experience. So there's so many spaces where lawyers can actually help, and as this states, law students as well.
Yes. So yeah, what we really believe is all you need is the drive to make a difference. And, we and other organizations will help you take care of the rest. Rushika mentioned serving as a poll worker. The ABA actually has a program called pollworker.esq, which encourages lawyers and people in the legal profession to volunteer as poll workers. And then to Selena's point, there are so many other ones, but again, our goal is with this program, and you'll see in the chat, I believe there is a link that you can click on if you want more information, or if you want to volunteer and get involved. So what we're trying to do is we want to let people know what the opportunities are for you. And if you click on that link, we'll get back in touch with you and we'll try and set you up with some training. But what we'll also do is we'll connect you with an organization that you can work with. And again, you know, if maybe you're a transactional lawyer or whatever kind of lawyer or a law student, these other organizations will train you for the tasks for which they need help. And we are, you know, we're working on that strategy right now with other people. So we'll definitely be back in touch with you later on all of that. But yeah, you just, if you want to help, there's always something in some place where you can help. All right, Rushika.
All right, let's change it up and go for drawing lines for 100.
Okay. What is gerrymandering? Selena.
So gerrymandering is, I guess the easiest way to say it is the unlawful drawing of districts within a jurisdiction to benefit a particular political party or agenda. They're usually drawn to the exclusion or harm of certain groups of people. And they're usually drawn not necessarily with population in mind, but with party in mind. I guess that's the easiest.
Sorry, my mouse is just, okay. Yes, the process of drawing political boundary, and I will give you your points now before I forget. The process of drawing political boundaries in a manner which gives an unfair political advantage to one party over another. So let's get back to the board. Selena.
Everyone's voice matters for 200.
Okay. What happens if I make a mistake while I am filling out my ballot? Jason.
Yeah, a lot of times if you talk to the poll worker there, they should be able to bring you a new ballot or assist you in changing the ballot. You're not stuck with that if you haven't actually submitted it yet.
Okay, that is correct. You can request a new ballot. And if you are, for those of you who vote on electronic machines, there is now a process by which you can review your ballot and you can correct your mistake. And that process will also let you know if you have an overvote, meaning you inadvertently voted for more than one candidate or issue. But then the machinery now will also let you know if you have an undervote. And that just means that, you know, maybe there are 5 races on the ballot and you only chose 4 and you're perfectly entitled to not vote. But the technology now allows you to know if you had made a mistake and you intended to vote for everyone or every issue. And that's what's called an undervote. So, all right. Jason.
Let's go with, let's do voting is easy, isn't it, for 100.
Okay. Doesn't everyone have a driver's license? Selena.
No.
As easy as that, right? Yeah.
So the short answer is no. And one of the communities that is most affected by this, of course, not just, okay, why do you keep doing that when I'm answering the question? Then
It's
it looks
okay.
like I'm
No,
cheating.
because you're not, because you answered the question
Oh,
correctly.
I answered the question. Okay,
Yeah,
it was yes or no.
yeah.
So I was just gonna say that you know, there are 2 communities that are, well, 3 I would say, that are most impacted by this. One is, of course, the elderly that don't have limited access to get IDs or licenses or renewals. The second is people of limited means, same limit, because they're often they don't need driver's licenses. They have a different form of identification, or they don't need identification at all. And culturally, that's just not what they have. And then the other thing is polling places and places to get IDs, government issued IDs, are so far away that access to them is severely limited.
No, I think that's right. Does anyone have any thoughts or can share any anecdotes of experiences of people that they know. I mean, part of the reason why we want to put questions like this in there is I was fortunate to write an article recently that sort of talked about these issues. And, you know, for me, it's very easy to vote, right? I have a driver's license. I have a car. I can, you know, easily get to where I need to go, and no one has ever questioned my ability to vote. But part of our goal in doing this program and in doing the work that we want to do is we want people to understand that just because it's easy for us to vote or me to vote does not mean that it's easy for everyone else to vote. And we shouldn't make that assumption. And we should try to understand why it is difficult. You know, everyone should have the same experience and ability to access a franchise as we all do. And we should all work to make sure that everyone has equal access. So if some people are looking at these questions and wondering, well, you know, that's a silly question. I think for some people, they just think they have a driver's license or a photo ID. And if they have one, then everyone must also. And it's really important for people to understand that it's not the same for everyone else. And yet these same rules apply to everyone else. So
someone in the chat brought up a very good point, and I forgot to touch upon this. And this is, a lot of people in Indigenous communities don't have traditional addresses, physical addresses.
right.
And also people who have housing insecurities don't have, you know, oh, someone else just said that. Exactly. People with housing insecurities also don't have physical addresses, which limits their ability to get an ID.
No, exactly. So yeah, and I apologize. It's very hard for me to look at the chat because now for me, it's up here. So thank you all for looking at that. So all right. Selena, next question.
Okay, lawyers as change makers for 3.
Okay.
I like to mix it up.
Perfect. What is the Election Protection Project? Federico, is your hand still up or did you just raise it?
Sorry, it was up. What is the Election Protection Project?
Oh, Jason, sorry.
No, that's okay. Just raise it. It's a project where people can volunteer and serve as essentially, as I think Rushika was talking about earlier, and others, just eyes and ears on election day, whether it's a hotline, whether it's working down in a particular election, to volunteer and get involved. And you know, no previous experience is needed or required.
Yes, so the Election Protection Project is a nonpartisan coalition of national, state, and local organizations that are committed to ensuring that all eligible voters have the right to vote and that their votes are counted. And this covers all aspects of the voting process, including voter registration, early voting, mail-in voting, and voting in person on election day. And the American Bar Association is one of the partners in election protection. And so as we move forward, there are many different groups that are part of this. We will, if people are interested in helping out, we will be probably trying to connect you with different organizations that are affiliated with the Election Protection Project, at least with regards to the elections for this midterm cycle. And then we anticipate also, we want to get volunteers for the cycle, but we also know that there are other issues that are ongoing. So these are the kind of groups that we would be hoping to connect you with. Okay, Jason.
Let's go to Everyone's Voice Matters for 300.
Okay. If you are placed under guardianship, can you vote? Selena.
Yes. I keep getting these.
Actually, do you want to expand a little on it?
Sure, but I think yes, but it depends on the kind of guardianship that you have.
Yes, that's the right. Yes, correct.
Oh, is that what you were asking?
Yes.
I thought, yes, it depends on the kind of guardianship that you have. Sorry.
That's okay.
Sorry.
That's okay. So I'm gonna have to do something for the next time I do this. I don't know how to move this, my sharing button, and so I can't, oh, there you go. So you're correct, because generally speaking, historically, most individuals who were placed under guardianship could not vote due to their mental impairment. And what we're finding now is some parents or place their children, perhaps of an autistic child, place their child under guardianship, and when they everything, they are able to understand political issues and decide, but then when they go to vote, they find that because they are under guardianship, that they cannot. So very often now people, we're finding that people should maybe try and do a carve out. And perhaps what it is your guardianship should only deal with financial matters. You don't want someone to buy a house or do something like that, but then for all other aspects of their daily life, they're able to do it. And I think also this is leading to a movement away from guardianship, where there are different ways where people can work together to help people instead of having really stringent guardianship requirements. So yeah, so it does depend on the guardianship. So you will find some of these answers are yes or no, or yes and no. So Selena, next question.
Go with drawing lines for 200.
Okay. What is cracking? Jason.
When, as part of redistricting or gerrymandering, a community is essentially broken apart into, it's divided into two separate, or at least two separate districts. We see this happen frequently in, racial gerrymandering when Black communities are divided. And with this what happens here is that their vote is diluted. Their voting power is diluted as a result.
That is correct. And then there is packing, which takes many minority communities and seeks to put them all in a single district. So they have one district, whereas they could have a voice in many districts. And then stacking is one where, Jason, is that's the one where they sort of spread them all out into different?
Well, stacking is for an at-large, when you when there's an opportunity to vote for, and this happens really in local races, but when a particular community would have the opportunity to maybe vote for 2 or 3 members of a council, they're then thrown into an at-large district, and their votes are essentially stacked, so they wouldn't be able to have those multiple members of their choice, multiple candidates of their choice. You already did it, I think.
Okay.
I saw it hovering.
Right? Sorry.
That's
All
okay.
right. So see, it's not the technology, it's me.
No.
Jason, next question.
Let's stay with drawing lines for 300.
Okay. Does gerrymandering always favor a particular political party? Jason.
Yeah, no. You have situations where New York or Maryland, where Democrats do it to favor Democrats, and you have other states where Republicans do it to favor Republicans. But on top of that, gerrymandering doesn't always have to be political. It can be racial gerrymandering as well, where it's done to disadvantage or sometimes to advantage a particular racial community.
Okay. And so, yes, you're correct. Gerrymandering does give an advantage to a particular political party over another, but it is done equally in heavily Democratic and Republican districts. So I think some people think that it's only done by one party, and it's not. It's just basically gerrymandering is a mechanism that people use to stay in power, political power. And so when we are looking for redistricting reform, we're looking at ways to make it equal and really based on the population that exists and in a fair way, and to draw a district the right way where it's not packing, cracking, or stacking. All right. So I see the chat is up to 17. Is there anything are there any questions that you think any of you think we need to address?
There are a lot of people posting really interesting stuff,
Yeah.
comments to a lot of these questions, and I hope our guests are able to go to the chat as well and look at them. They are good. They really highlight a lot of things that we're discussing here, and they're giving some examples of their own experience.
Okay.
So unless you want to go through all of them, but that is what's going on. So I think we thank you all for adding more to this. Thank you.
Yes, definitely. And I'm sorry, it's hard for me to run the board and see the chat at the same time. So. Okay, Jason, next question.
Let's keep it with redistricting. Let's do 400 drawing lines.
Okay. What is an independent redistricting commission? Jason.
Yeah, I mean, I think in response to what we were just talking about, where we have this partisan or racial gerrymandering, there are a lot of states that have tried to put in place independent redistricting commissions. Sometimes they're by referendum, sometimes they're by a vote of the state legislature. And the idea is that this is outside the political process. These might be law professors, these might be statisticians, that come up with the redistricting criteria and the actual boundaries and lines. Sometimes we see these independent redistricting commissions as bipartisan, where you have members of both parties as part of the commission, again, outside the political process. Other times it's nonpartisan, where you don't have members of the political parties. You have those folks truly outside of any partisan leanings. The idea, obviously, and the point is to make the lines, quote unquote, fair, where we don't have communities, cracked or packed, or we don't have incumbents protected in crazy, animal-shaped districts.
Okay. And you are correct again. And so I guess I'd be curious, based on panelists' own experiences where they live. I do think it's interesting, Jason, when you were talking about sort of, when we have, when there is sort of the partisan bent, or where we know that where there is still some political, influence in that respect. So I'm sort of curious if we could have small discussion about sort of citizen redistricting commissions, right? Where really it is more citizen-based versus maybe people who, well, obviously if it's citizen-based in this way, they're not appointed, but sort of what differences you see and what you think might be more effective or less effective. And then again, maybe based on where you live. I live in Virginia, where recently we've undergone redistricting, but again, it's very interesting because at the time that the redistricting, when everything was going through, it was sort of interesting. The Democrats who were there, was sort of surprising for some, well, maybe not surprising, where it didn't quite go in the direction that we thought it might go, because again, at the end of the day, people a desire to hold the power they hold. So I'm just sort of wondering what other people's experiences might be, just sort of as we look at it, because then you have other states where it's solely in the power of the legislature. And so that means
there is litigation in Illinois recently. There was litigation from different organizations, some civil rights organizations in federal court over the redistricting in Illinois. And there were you would have these groups that normally wouldn't be in the same on the same side, and there were asking that the map be redistricted. in Illinois. This is done by the legislature, mostly controlled by Democrats, but you still have civil rights organizations and the Republican Party in Illinois doing this. And one of the things that we're asking the courts was to create some independent redistricting bodies to oversee that. So you don't always have to depend on that. You can request it to court. Now, it wasn't granted, but that is at least one of the mechanisms that exists. And I'm sure Jason can talk more about that if he needs to. But that was my experience in Illinois recently.
There was question asked, excuse me, do we have any thoughts about the SCOTUS decision about Louisiana's redistricting that came out today, and the gerrymandering impact? Honestly, I sort of saw the headline of it, but I haven't had a chance to really look at the opinion yet.
First time I hear of this. Thank you, Selena. This is the first I hear of this. Thank you. I have to look at it after this.
Yeah, unfortunately, I have been focused on other things and have not looked at anything today. So, Jason, have you?
Well, I had a heads up that it was coming only because of after Friday's decision, there were some talks about what else could be coming within this session. So I kind of knew it was coming.
Yeah, I mean, this is the perfect example of the quote unquote shadow docket, where the Supreme Court, without really any full briefing on the merits, decided to, I believe it was to stay a lower court, a lower district court opinion that would have allowed for an additional congressional district that would be, Black majority congressional district. And the thought is that it's an ominous sign. It was not a final decision on the merits. I saw a question just pop up. The idea is that, court watchers say that they're going to answer these questions of the power of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act to prevent against vote dilution in the context of racial gerrymandering. They're considering a case in Alabama that's going to be argued in the fall, and that this Louisiana case will essentially be, not formally brought into that, but the Alabama case will help determine the outcome. Now, you hear fall, you hear an election, so you might say, well, what does that mean for this election? That means that the idea that there would be that additional congressional district down in Louisiana, that's now not an option anymore. So it's, we talked about Shelby County and Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. I'm sure we might also talk about the way the Supreme Court has weakened Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. Last term, it was the Brnovich opinion. But this is another opportunity for the Supreme Court to further weaken the effectiveness of the Voting Rights Act. And in this case, Section 2.
And I will just note on Jason's point, as part of the ABA's larger advocacy around voting rights and election protection, the ABA is preparing an amicus brief in that case. So that is forthcoming.
Okay.
That's great.
So, Jason?
We're on a roll with redistricting here. So why don't we just keep talking about it rather than jumping around? So we'll do 500.
All right. How does the U.S. Census affect redistricting? Federico.
Oh, I think Jason put his hand up first.
Oh,
but,
sorry.
No, Federico.
Federico.
I'm trying to look.
I never raised my hand. It's all him.
It's still one, you're upsetting Selena. She was right. You're the ringer. Well, it's the census determines the population changes, and that affects the number of representatives that can go to Congress. So the redistricting does get affected by the number of people. You can get more representation or less representation depending on that. So you depend on numbers. Of course, you hope that they're accurate. You hope that everyone is counted. You hope that everybody, is represented, and that is an issue. And there was a case before the United States Supreme Court on the issue of citizenship, for example, that was one of the questions in the census, and it might have had a chilling effect on a lot of individuals, whether to answer or not, whether they were citizens. And thank goodness that did not get on. So that's one way in which you try to implement policies that may prevent certain groups from being counted, but favoring others, which is not fair. The idea is that you count the population, period.
Right. You're
Lower
correct.
your hand.
So yes, so the U.S. Census Bureau provides the 50 states, the District of Columbia, and Puerto Rico with population counts to use in their redrawing of congressional and state legislative district boundaries. So let's move on. Federico. Oh, can you lower your hand first?
Oh,
Sorry.
sure. I was going to cheat. Why not? Okay. Sorry.
I think Selena caught on. She's
Yeah,
Okay.
it's my form of gerrymandering. I'm in full control here. You don't like it, take it to court. There you go. Okay. Let's see. Let's do. Let's see. My goodness. Everyone's voice. No. Let's do protecting the right to vote for 400, please.
okay. Do voters have a right to have voting materials translated into another language? Federico.
Yes.
Okay.
So I mean, there are a just anecdotally, you go to vote, and I see the ballots. I see that you have the option to vote in Chinese and Spanish, and to have that explained to you. I don't know if this is nationally done, but at least in some jurisdictions that does happen. So I would think that the answer is yes.
It is, and it is. So I'm sorry, I'm just trying to click on the right. There we go. So Section 203 of the Voting Rights Act is the language minority provision. And that states that where with regard to voting materials, and that includes voter registration applications and ballot initiatives and all of that, and the ballot itself, that where the language of minority provision is triggered, where the number of US citizens of voting age is a single language minority group within the district jurisdiction, and that they are more than 10,000 or 5% of all voting age citizens, or if you are on an Indian reservation and that it exceeds 5% of all reservation residents, and the illiteracy rate of the group is higher than the national rate. And this is, Federico, to your point, I think this is what the minimum is for federal elections. And I think clearly there are jurisdictions that, knowing that they have significant minority populations, will go further and will do more translation efforts.
Well, I have a question for the rest of the group. Was this incorporated into the Voting Rights Act initially, or is this something that was at a later? I mean, if this goes back to 1965, it's pretty darn progressive.
So this was, I believe, and I might be incorrect, this was either I want to say in the 82 amendments to the Voting Rights Act. It may have been the amendment prior to that, but it was not in, I think to your point, it was not in the original 65.
Thank you. Can Jason get an extra? Can I share my points with him?
We're just all combining it together.
I didn't give you your points yet, right? I don't think so.
You did not.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Boom.
Again, I'm just.
Right.
Again, I get now why sometimes when people do this, there are two people doing this instead of just me. So
Okay, so interestingly, just looking at my very quick Googling.
yes.
So I don't know if the Google is accurate, but I believe it is. That amendment didn't become a thing until 2005.
Wow. Yeah. That makes more sense.
Yeah.
That it's recent. Yeah.
Selena, I would give you bonus points if I could. I don't know how to add it into the.
I I don't need it. That's
You
okay.
cannot add bonus points
I
when
need
she's
it.
cheating and going on Google. That's not
Well,
right.
no. Bonus points for using Google to expand upon an already answered
Oh, I see.
question.
Exactly. Yeah. To be
I
clear,
wasn't the
I
one
was
trying
not-
to cheat with my already raised hand, my friend.
Now I'm all confused. So, Federico.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, let's wrap it up. Protecting the right to vote for 500.
Okay. Is third-party ballot collection permissible? Jason.
It depends on the state. In most states it is, although this has now come under fire by those same entities that we would say are engaged in voter suppression. They would call this ballot harvesting. But third-party ballot collection, just to the issues, and I'm sure the other panelists can speak to it, it's extraordinarily important in certain areas where there are, indigenous communities, in urban areas. This is proven helpful in order for people to fully have the right to cast the ballot.
Yes, that is correct. And I think, Jason, you had mentioned Brnovich, so this is where we'll talk about that. So in 2021, the Supreme Court in Brnovich, who is the Attorney General of Arizona,
That's right.
versus the Democratic National Committee, reversed a U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals decision ruling that Arizona had created a law which sought to limit ballot collection, in saying that only a voter, their family member, the U.S. Postal Service, or an election official were the only people that could handle absentee or mail-in ballots. And the U.S. Court of Appeals found that that law was in violation of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, which deals with discrimination on the basis of race, color, or minority language status. And Brnovich reversed that, and I think they sent it back, but it has the same effect, right, Jason, that we're talking about the decision in Louisiana.
It set the standard so high in order to show a Section 2 essentially violation, that it really, it made these types of challenges, Section 2 challenges to voter suppression, very, very difficult now moving forward. Not impossible, but very difficult. And that's why when we're talking about redistricting in the Alabama case, sort of the other part of the Section 2 use when it comes to redistricting and gerrymandering. But yeah, this was, if I'm not mistaken, an Alito opinion. And I'm not going to waste time editorializing on it, but it was quite a doozy. We'll leave it at that.
Okay. And yeah, I mean, I'd like to, if we can, just sort of talk about what, and I think, Jason, you had mentioned it earlier. I think when people call it ballot harvesting, it has such a negative connotation, right? And what we know is, sort of as you had mentioned, is people who live in Native American communities, they have to drive upwards of 100, 200 miles to get to a mail, right? To get to a mailbox. And so you have communities where legitimately it's not practical for every single person to be driving 200 miles to get mail, to pick up the ballot and to return it that way. And also, it's not just Native, it's people who live in rural communities also, right? There are
also people with disabilities.
Right. No, exactly. Right. People in people who work 3 jobs. Right. No, exactly. So, I mean, I just think, these are some of the issues that are important. And again, for some people for whom it is very easy to get their mail and drop it off, and they think, why can't everyone else do that? Practically speaking, there's a fair amount of the population that cannot do that. So again, that's the purpose of this type of programming, just to sort of let everyone know that the ease through which you go through life is not necessarily everyone else's, right? So we just want to, it's practical. It has nothing, there's no ulterior motive to asking, you know, if you live on a reservation, having one person collect, you know, everyone's mail or taking turns and dropping it off. It's just a matter of practicality. So, and to Selena's point, if you don't have a car or you're not able to do it, there, you know, we just want to give an equal opportunity to everyone.
I'll just point out another example that somebody mentioned in the chat, but people in nursing homes, this is also, you know, affected. So,
right. So it is, you know, it's not a remote population. There are actually more people than one would realize, your neighbors or whatever, that might have similar issues. And thank you for looking at the chat. Jason?
Let's do everyone's voice matters for 400.
Okay.
Please.
When you are at the polling place and are told that you are not registered to vote, do you have a right to vote? Sorry, Jason. Selena.
I think in all, but I know in most jurisdictions, you have the opportunity to submit a preliminary ballot that will, and may be called something in other places, but a provisionary ballot, that's the word I was looking for. It wasn't coming to me. A provisionary ballot, which allows you to vote until, you know, to vote pending confirmation of your registration. And in other jurisdictions, you are allowed to vote, to register on the spot. I think Illinois is one of those jurisdictions, but I could be wrong about that. But there are a number of jurisdictions that will allow you to register on the spot and then submit a provisionary ballot.
You are correct. If I can get that, oh, there we go. Yeah, so generally you have a right to vote a provisional ballot, which will be set aside and counted after your registration has been confirmed. And then Idaho, Minnesota, and New Hampshire do not have provisional balloting, but Selena, to your point, those are 3 states that have same-day registration, which makes it unnecessary to vote a provisional ballot. So this is really important as people seek to help voters who show up at the polls and who believe that they are registered to vote. There is a mechanism that whereby they can vote this provisional ballot, and then they'll have to wait for the determination on whether or not their registration has been confirmed. Okay. Selena, next question.
So let's close out everyone's voice matters for 500.
Okay. Can I bring someone into the polls with me to help me with the physical act of voting? Rushika.
oh, I'm going to say, I'm basing my answer off of recent news out of Texas, which said this could not happen. So in some jurisdictions you can, and in some you can't.
And sorry, I'm just. So yes, under federal law, voters with limited English proficiency and those with disabilities can bring an individual of their choice to give in-person assistance. So in Texas, and then it's very clear under the law though, that the helper cannot be the employer's voter, the voter's employer or their union or an agent of either entity, because we obviously would not want people to coerce their employees to voting a certain way.
I think that brings up a very interesting point.
Yeah.
And that is, people assume that helpers will be there to help assist someone navigate the process. But often the case, not often, but there have been situations where, for example, a spouse will want to go in, a husband, for example, will want to go in with the wife, and the fear for limiting someone going in without a clear need for assistance is that that person, not just in this voter situation, or excuse me, not just in the employer or union situation or agent situation, but even in a familial situation, could exercise undue influence. So there are reasonable reasons why someone wouldn't be allowed, but the absolute exclusion of it, and Texas is always an outlier, but the absolute exclusion of it limits other people's abilities to access the polls and to vote effectively. And so.
Yeah, and I think it's pretty clear, though, that, you know, sort of to your point, because of the concern for undue influence, that if you are able to do it, but when you go to the polls, you do have to explain either, you know, I guess that privacy issue, you do have to either explain that you either have the limited English proficiency or you have some sort of disability, so you need the assistance. And, you know, it's really clear, at least under the law, that this is really, you know, as much as we can, that this is for the physical act of voting, but this is not to, you know, to give the undue influence and to affect that. So Rushika.
Let's do lawyers as changemakers for 200.
Okay. I'm a litigator. What can I do to make a difference? Jason.
Sue. You can do anything. I mean, litigators, like any other lawyers, like any other individuals, can help out in a variety of ways. Folks that have specific skills, litigators, and I used to be one in my past life, you can help through either election protection teams to be on standby and be ready to go into court to keep the polls open if a machine breaks, or to allege that, you know, there have been voting irregularities where people have been turned away from the polls. So bottom line is you can do anything.
And that is correct. So to your point, you know, you can help with voting rights litigation cases, you can take depositions, you can interview voters who are having problems voting. You know, at the end of the line, at the end of the day, as we said before, you know, your skill set can be used to make an enormous difference. So we just want to encourage people who want to do something and let them know that it doesn't matter what their background is, you know, what by nature of their lawyers and law students, by nature of their training, just possess certain skill sets that could be very well used in situations like this. All right, Jason.
Let's go. We haven't done alphabet soup since I messed up that first one because I let my day job get in the way of what we were supposed to be doing here. So let's go back to alphabet soup for.
Yeah, lower your hand. You don't need any advantages.
Okay. Well played, well played.
The gauntlet. Yep.
That's what's fun about this game. The little competitive spirit comes out. It's a little different than a traditional program, right? All right, alphabet soup.
It's fun.
What is the ADA?
Oh, sorry, no, go ahead.
Was it Rushika? I really did.
No, Rushika.
Oh.
It was, okay.
Okay, to hopefully stay on the board here, the Americans with Disabilities Act.
There you go. That's right. And the reason sorry, having a problem getting, there we go. The reason that is important is that does also inform a lot of protections at the polling places. For instance, under the Americans with Disability Act and under other legislation, it's important to have accessible, physical accessibility to polling places for individuals, and also the requirement of at least one piece of polling machinery or way for individuals with disabilities to vote. Because there, as we mentioned in the earlier question, if you have are sight impaired or in other ways, you could bring someone with you to help you read the ballot. But there is also machinery that sight impaired people can use to, I think it scans the ballot and they can hear what the ballot is and they can vote that way. So there is a desire to create as much privacy as possible for individuals with disabilities. So that's why the ADA is important. All right, Rushika, next question.
Let's do voting is easy, isn't it, for 200?
Okay. Doesn't everyone have a street address for their home? It was either Federico or Jason. In the little time that I asked the question, I saw because I didn't see who's going to win it. So I'll leave
Federico,
it.
take it away.
Oh, I thought we were gonna do paper, rock, scissors. That's fine, not a problem. We already discussed this. The answer is no.
Okay.
We get plenty of examples of that. I mean, I think Selena really gave a great dissertation on that, mentioning the Native Americans, for example, the homeless, you know, and how about just folks who are, I think somebody in the chat spoke of people like in nursing homes, for example, right? So there are a number of, the answer is no. I mean, not everybody has a street address. Yeah, they should be able to vote.
Yes, so no, some voters do not have homes, and often rural residents and Native American voters live on reservations or remote areas with no residential street address. And we've seen these cases a lot. I think in particular in the last couple of years, there's been a lot of reporting on, especially in Native American communities, where Native Americans who live on reservations, they do not use traditional street addresses, and so that impedes their ability to register to vote in jurisdictions that that require a street address. Okay. Federico.
Okay, voting is easy, isn't it, for 400?
Okay. How long should you have to wait in line to vote? Jason.
I mean, you shouldn't have to wait in line. I mean, you should be able to go and vote. Obviously, there are some lines that do occur. You know, where it gets outrageous is when you hear stories, you know, Wisconsin in the rain, Georgia, where folks have to wait hours and hours and hours just to vote. And that's when, you know, that can be considered a form of voter suppression as well. And it disproportionately impacts communities of color, Black communities, urban areas, lower income areas. These are normally precincts that don't have, you know, multiple voting machines per precinct. And sometimes that's done purposely as well. So that's
I would just add that it's also the communities where they usually have hourly wages that don't allow them to be able to take that much time off to vote. And so they have the choice of sitting in line for 4 hours or losing that much of their compensation for the week.
I think also, if I can just add, one of the kind of creative solutions I would say to this that we saw in the last election was the use of big stadiums and big arenas as polling places. You saw people getting in and getting out of line really quickly because they had the ability to vote quickly and effectively. And even, I think we saw this with, in Georgia, the State Farm Arena being used, as well as several vote centers in California. And I believe also in Colorado, they also set up ballot drop boxes in the parking lots of a lot of major arenas. So that was very easy and effective way to not have to wait in line.
Yeah, but you have to have state election officials that who want to provide access to as many people as possible. And so when you are dealing with jurisdictions that are not inclined to do that for whatever reason, then those creative solutions are not going to be presented.
Right.
Or certainly barriers to them will be, you know, presented. So
no, I think those are all really good points. And so So I just, in 2014, there was a bipartisan presidential commission on election administration, and they declared that 30 minutes should be the average wait time. And as Jason mentioned, despite this recommendation, we still hear, of 3 and 6 hour waiting and longer waiting periods for voting, right? So, and to your point, this is a method of voter suppression. And what we do know also is it is in usually, I think, historically underserved communities and BIPOC communities where that happens more. And then Rushika's point about sort of these voting convenience centers, I do, from a administrator's perspective, do see a trend that way. But Selena, you make an absolutely great point that that is an option if people want to exercise that option. I just, speaking for myself, it's because technology is here with us on that point. I live in Fairfax County, Virginia, and they, in the last couple of election cycles, sort of created these mini little vote centers within the county. And this last election, it was finally a ballot on demand. Before that, you would show up at the precinct and they had folders and you would say where you live. They would literally have to go through the folder to give you the correct ballot, but they had pre-printed them all. And now, at least in Fairfax County, when you do it that way, once they know what when they pull up your information, they just print a ballot for you on site. And I had the opportunity to be in New Mexico, I don't know, maybe about 8 years ago, and they were already ahead of the curve then, and that's how they were printing ballots on demand. So I think technology is with us to make it easier. And again, Selena, to your point, it's just a matter of whether or not people want to make it easy for people to do that. So I didn't give you your points, right, Jason?
No.
I just did.
Setting me up there. I don't. It's fine.
Okay, so Jason.
Let's finish out that voting.
Okay. What is the furthest distance some people must travel to vote from their home? Jason.
So I'm taking this as sort of a factual, not what should it be. But some voters have to travel hundreds of miles to vote, and these are again in rural areas, in areas with Native American communities.
And you are correct. So some voters who live in extremely rural, remote areas or on Native American reservations must drive upwards of 100 to 200 miles to vote or to retrieve mail. It's very interesting. When I was doing the research for this program, I was trying to figure out what the average distance was from where you live to vote. And I've been having an extremely difficult time finding that information.
I think there are too many factors.
Right? Yeah, I did find one study that said once you get past a certain one, basically every quarter of a mile that you are further away from your home and your polling place does have an impact on voter turnout, right? Because 100%. To your point, right? There are people who, you have some employers who are absolutely, you can have, even if you give someone 2 hours, if you're an hourly worker, to your point, is that easy? Or if it's not close by, I was joking around with someone today about all the work from home. People are just now realizing how much time they actually spend commuting to and from work, when before you just knew it, but now people are realizing it's 3 hours to do that, right? So those same things extend into voting. So, but I might now be having some resources come my way that might give a better idea of sort of in different places how far people have to go to vote, and I will certainly share that once I know that. And also to the point of voter suppression, the further you put places away, because now we're reading of and hearing of jurisdictions that are closing instead of expanding places to vote, as Rushika, suggested with the polling places, that they're actually consolidating polling places and whatnot. And what we unfortunately do find is those are in, traditionally underserved communities. So Jason.
Let's do lawyers as change makers, considering that's the theme of what we should be.
Okay.
So let's do that for 400.
All right. I'm a transactional lawyer. How can I help to perfect democracy? Jason.
Anything. I mean, it's just, you can use your skills looking at contracts and looking over details related to contracts and help put together voter registration materials or details of state voting laws. You can volunteer for election protection. You can, go be a poll worker. You can do anything anyone else can do.
If I could add to that.
Yes.
Another thing you could do is, even if it's a transactional lawyer, if you have access to, bar ratings of judges, for example, you can help promote information on certain candidates as well. Judges get elected as well. Judges, they're a branch of government. Often people go and vote and they don't know what they're voting for. But, generally as an attorney, you should be savvy. You should have access to ratings, which you can then promote among your community or your community of lawyers as well, which then can be disseminated into family members. And you can bring this information. You can even look it up on your phone as you're voting, as long as you have, you know what site to look for. So yeah, you can at least provide information. That
you can also find, as far as the judges go, you can find in a lot of jurisdictions, and I want to say everywhere, but especially in more diverse communities, you can find ratings that align with you and who you are personally and how you identify. So, for example, in Cook County, in Illinois, for our judges, we have several bar associations that all review under the Alliance of Bar Associations, I think it's called, and then it's the Cook County Bar Association, which is the traditionally Black bar Association, LGBTQ plus bar. There's Hispanic Bar Association of Illinois, and each one of them, the Chicago Bar Association, each one of them conducts their own reviews and provides their own ratings, but they put them out as a joint effort to the world. So if I, as a Black woman, am specifically interested in what the Cook County Bar Association, as the Black Bar Association in Illinois, has rated a particular judge, I might be more inclined to go there. So do your research, and voting for judges is very important. Judges are very important. Just want to point that out again.
Thank you.
Important. All right, good.
All right, so and thank you. I don't live in a jurisdiction that elects judges, so for me, the whole concept is it's not much that I'm familiar with. So yes, you can use your business and corporate background to help organizations attain nonprofit status, conduct board trainings, and other tasks that will ensure that organizations on the ground are in compliance with necessary ethics and other regulations. And as we keep telling you, you can be trained to support call centers or any other activities. So please don't let your day job limit what you can do to help perfect democracy. Okay, I'm looking at the time now. We're at my time, 4:24. So let's do one more question before we move on to Final Jeopardy. Jason.
Let's finish out this column.
All right.
Let's do it.
All right. What can I do to make sure that my congressional district is drawn fairly? Selena.
Number one, vote. Vote, 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 vote. Number two, be aware of where the districts are in your, most people don't even know, right? So be aware of where your districts are, and make your voice heard and you might want some more fancy answer, but I will say this: make your voice heard to your local state, to your state and local representatives. So people who are close to you, to your state representative, or the people within your area. I think everybody thinks in terms of like federal representatives, and sort of minimize the impact that state and local or specifically state legislators have on your individual rights and your individual access to the polls.
Okay.
May I add to that quickly?
Of course.
Look out for organizations that may be challenging districts because they're often looking for plaintiffs. You can become a plaintiff, a named plaintiff in a district that's being affected. So you just contact the organization, hey, I want to be one of the plaintiffs, and they might take you up on it.
That's a very good point.
Yeah.
Can I also add making sure you fill out the census also? Be counted.
100%.
Very much so.
I beat that drum so much to people, even people who, I will tell you this, I have a friend who is a lawyer, very educated, whose partner is Latinx, but and I think a citizen, I'm pretty sure. But she was offended that she had to put that she had to enter information about race and ethnicity on the census, and I had to sort of talk to her about why that was, and actually why it was important, and so people assume, and so she eventually did fill it out, and she was going to fill it out anyway. She just was sort of smarting over it and kind of like, should I, shouldn't I? But I only make this point is because people assume that it's those people who don't know better who don't answer, but there are a lot of people who quote unquote should know, or you expect to know, that have legitimate fears. And so sort of being a voice and saying to them, here's why it's important to complete the census and why this matters, because it matters on how you are counted, is important as well.
No, absolutely. And so, lawyers and as leaders in your community, you can help your clients and community draw maps. You can testify before redistricting bodies. You can help redistricting organizations in their efforts to reform the system. So yeah, I mean, and then, yeah, voting is very important, and definitely filling out the census and all of that. There's just, and also I think, with the skill set and the testifying and whatnot, lawyers can help people who they're working with in these organizations craft the arguments or the presentation before the redistricting board. So, all right. All right, let's move on to Final Jeopardy now. Are you guys ready? Okay, let's go. All right.
Do we have to select how many points we want?
Yes. So now you can select up to what you have to bid. And then if you get the answer right, you will get that amount of points.
But I think we can't tell you. I think, do we just write it down?
Oh, no, you can tell me and I will up it right now. I can do that.
Going
You
for
just
all
have
of
to
it,
write-
man.
Huh?
All of it.
All of it? Okay.
Yeah, me too. I'm all in.
Me too.
You're all in. Rushika?
I guess if everyone else is, I am too.
All right, ready? So I'm gonna, I'll read the question out loud on the screen, and then you write down your answers on a sheet of paper, and then we'll be able to, that's how we'll know. Because unfortunately, technology is not quite with us yet for you to participate directly on my computer, so. All right, what do you think is the best way that lawyers and law students can serve as change makers to help perfect our democracy?
I feel like this could be a word or this could be a dissertation. I'm confused.
How about somewhere in between? I can't see my timer because my screen sharing thing is covering it. Are we about ready?
Well, I think you never hit start, so there's that.
Okay. Oh, so you can see it. I can't see it because I
Yeah.
actually have something on top of the. I'm gonna have to figure this out. Oh, okay. Oh, I'll hit start now.
I feel like, yeah, we can.
And it gives
Oh,
you,
there
yeah,
we go.
I mean,
we're good.
You're good? Are you guys good?
We're good.
All right. So, oh shoot. I guess I need, oh, I shouldn't have hit start because I need you to show, I guess you should read your answers. I'm sorry. Now we have to wait for the music to stop. I'll have to take the music out.
The music would have been nice.
Okay. there we go.
Right?
All right. Now you guys can share. That's how it works, right? You share your answers and then we show what the answer is. Because I can't.
yeah, but
show
couldn't
you.
we have always shown it?
I guess so. Yes.
We show
So-
all of our answers first.
Okay.
Oh, mine's disappearing. I'm gonna have to read it.
Mine
Okay.
too. Wait.
Okay. So let's just read. I can see Selena. So Selena, you can read yours out loud because I
I was
can't.
gonna say volunteer,
Yes.
donate,
Yes.
and educate.
I like that. Okay. Federico, I'm just literally going up my.
Mine is become familiar with history. If you don't know what people have gone through, if you're unfamiliar with how long and how hard it has been for people to fight for the right to vote, you cannot fully protect the future and what's happening now. We are in trouble. We're going back on many things. Jason and in particular, don't let it go to your head, Jason. But in particular, it's highlighted how a lot of these cases are eroding the effectiveness of landmark acts from 64 and 65. But you have to understand what it took us to get there. You have to understand the suffragette movement. We have to understand that. I was very upset with someone today. I told him, who did you vote for yesterday? And he said, well, I didn't go to vote. And I was upset. I reminded her that people have been jailed, people have died for your right to vote. So know your history.
Thank you. Rushika?
I
100%.
said by signing up with the ABA today to learn more and get trained to protect elections and voting rights, especially with the link in the chat right now. Sign up.
Perfect. Jason?
Volunteer to protect the right to vote. And
Perfect.
I cannot say it better than my three co-panelists.
Well, so I'll tell you, I think I have to add it now. Otherwise, I'll just add it now because I'm afraid if I go to the next screen, it will lose it. So everyone got the answer right.
Sure.
Except Jason. Jason got it wrong.
Wrong. Absolutely wrong.
Because this is what the right answer. And I think we showed it in all the answers that you have, right? Everyone makes change in their own way. And every change, however incremental, brings us closer to our goal of perfecting democracy. So I want to thank you all so much for taking the time. I can't get to the next, oh, there we go. So I think democracy did win in this one, but for the purpose of points, we'll let Jason be the champion this go around, but there's always another time. So again, thank you all so much for participating in this program with us. We're really excited to kick off this initiative to get lawyers and law students involved in perfecting democracy. Please look at the link. That has a form where you can sign up to receive more information. And as we begin to coordinate with these other organizations that we can match you up with, we will definitely get back in touch with you. So again, a big thank you to all of our panelists.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you for sharing your time. And we'll definitely be in touch. And if you're going to the ABA meeting in Chicago, look later for details on how we can do more. So thanks again for your time, and everyone stay safe.